Here's This Agile Thing with Mike Markey and Matt Beam and also Jeff Singleton.
Hello, robot. And welcome,
hey everybody.
everyone, to Here's This Agile Thing.
Here it is. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
So what are we going to talk about today?
I heard tell that Mike Markey has a thing he might want to talk about.
Well,
Heard it from him 5 seconds ago.
I am actually getting to do some live training again. Like I've been locked in my basement for 3 years since all this remote work stuff started, and I'm finally getting to go do in-person training with a group of people.
You have to travel and breathe the same air as your pupils.
Yes, there is some of that involved, and we'll see how that goes. But the cool part about it, though, is to get back to that live reaction of the audience that you really just don't get off that Zoom screen. It just, it doesn't land quite the same way.
Yeah, people can't turn their cameras off when you're live, right?
What they can do is they can just put a bag over their head but they never do that. It's okay to turn your camera off, but you don't.
That's what you could do. That's what you could do in your next training class.
At the next class,
a bunch of bags.
Just do this.
So we know that the things have changed, and if you're more comfortable, we have a way to blank it out.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. This is not the right thing. It should be more like this.
So, yeah, there you go. Just print out your whatever your
just print your face. Just give me your best thoughtful look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your LinkedIn photo, frankly, is what it would be.
It would have to be. So I'm going to get to do live training again, which means I get to pull the ball game out again. I get to take the bucket of balls and, the ballpoint game, the one with tennis balls.
The Bozo
Yes,
Circus.
I missed that.
You don't, Matt, are you unfamiliar with the ballpoint game? Come on.
Matt might be unfamiliar with the ball game. Refresh my memory. Is this an estimation training technique? Or
It is not estimation. It's sort of a live agile simulation before they really know what's going on. So usually before you introduce them to the framework, right after, or to a framework like Scrum, but after you've introduced them to agile principles. So values, principles, things, right? What is this agility thing of which we speak? And then you throw them into a exercise where they form groups, and you tell them you are a cross-functional team. And as a cross-functional team, every member of your team is necessary for execution of a item through the workflow you're going to devise, which basically means you all have to touch. So we're using tennis balls as your requirements.
So it's the handoff thing.
Yeah, except it's not a handoff, it's a toss, because handoff's too easy. So there has to be airtime in the throw. You can't just give it to the person next to you or to either side, just to create a little more drama. You have someone who's in the role of a product owner, so they are the only person who can put a ball into play or take the ball back out of play after it has gone through all the hands of every other member of the team. That is satisfying your definition of done. So we stick them in a group and we say, all right, make a plan. How are you going to do this? How many? And then you have to tell me how many balls you think you can deliver in a minute. Some people do 2 minutes, but then you need a lot more balls. So
the plan is who's going to toss it to who to simulate the difficulty of handoffs on a team, and
that's usually the difficulty part initially is how are we going to do it? What's the path? And then you start the timer and say go, and wackiness ensues because all of a sudden they are thrust into a time constrained, I got to get this action done. There's this implicit lockdown in their psyche on, oh my God, I have to keep the balls moving. I got to throw fast because we're being timed, right? Which
you have to speed up. You have to put more balls in the air.
Fast
That's
is
what people think.
They don't normally think balls in the air. They think one ball as fast as they can at first because they're not sure what they're doing yet. So they almost always just send one ball through the loop, boom, 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 right? And then somebody drops a ball because somebody threw it too hard or whatever. They haven't worked that out. or someone's so intent on throwing it to the next person they don't check to make sure the next person's ready to receive it. That's always a good one.
Right.
So, a ball to the face is a great teaching tool. So anyway, they go through, and then they have a retrospective. You say, all right, now reflect on how that went. How could you make the system work better in the next round? You get a minute to do that, then give me a new estimate. And then they get another pile of balls, and they continue on. And you're supposed to, so you're giving them a sense of operating under a time constraint. You're giving them a sense of having to collaborate to work to get stuff done. That there has to be good communication, that it helps to have an idea of what you're doing, and then you start messing with them. Then you start doing things like while they're in the midst of their thing, you walk up with well, that's not good. That's not realistic. Nobody comes in and takes work away from people.
You've never okay.
Okay.
I would think
No,
that would simulate like a so if the ball going to another person, maybe they use a system or something to do that, and so that the build server goes down or something like that. You could say that's a right.
Oh, okay.
Something that they need to transfer. Anyway, I didn't mean to.
Oh, and I left out if they drop a ball, it's dead. They've dropped the ball, they can't deliver it. So there's at the end you record what they planned, what they actually did, and how many defects they had. And then so you're tracking this information. They're getting to see what it's like to work under pressure, and then you start introducing valid variations. And this is where what I end up doing in the ball game gets way more interesting than the straight ball game, because what we just described so far is the straight ball game. And if they just did that would give them a sense for what they were doing. Yeah. But most organizations we go to have a sort of dysfunctional component to them that we want to highlight. So there's things like, I don't know, let's call it a management honey-do list. There's these things where a manager walks up to somebody and says, hey, I know you're busy, but can you do this too? It's just it'll take you 5 minutes. So we simulate that while they're tossing balls around. You come up with a distinctive thing. We used to do just a crumpled up piece of paper, but now I've got special colored balls. And so I'll walk up to somebody, tap them on the shoulder, someone in the middle of the pattern, not someone at the beginning of the pattern. And I will hand them this is really important. Can you do this too? And half the time they just grab it and just toss it into the pattern. So it goes to the next person in line, and then it makes its way to the product owner. And then they get to the end and they say, hey, we finished all these, plus we did this one. And I said, cool, does that one meet the definition of done? And they say, what? And I said, did every member of the team touch that ball? And everyone goes, and usually say, oh, no. Okay, well, then you don't get credit for that. And then, so later they learn, no, we send it to the product owner. Unless the product owner does it, it doesn't count, right? So all work has to come through the product owner. We'll do other things at one point after they've planned the sprint. We're going to do 10 balls. Like, okay. And then right before we go up, I'll say, funny thing, work is not often well understood when you take it into a sprint. Sometimes it's just easier or harder than you think. And therefore, and then I'll pull out the special bag and swap out some of the balls with different sized balls. So bigger balls, tiny balls,
footballs, basketball.
There's a Nerf football, there's wiffle balls, there's ping pong balls, but they're all yellow balls. And then we say, and then it's like, go. And they're like, and usually they protest. And you say, no, you just don't always know. Sometimes you're just surprised by what a story ends up being. And then because of the weight differential, they've gotten used to the pattern by tossing. They tend to cause errors when that happens. So that's always a good one. There's a lot of fun things that you can do to mess with them a little bit. If your organization is one where you tend to have shared resources, yes, I said resources, because you don't think of them as people. You think of them as numbers of hours assigned to a project. So you simulate that by tagging a couple of people and saying, you are on both of these teams. So that means you need to touch every ball on both teams. And good luck working that out. And so then that really causes, because somebody's flipping around, turning one way, turning the other.
Yeah.
We'll also swap members of teams. Like once one team has come up with their pattern and another team has come up with their pattern, you say, okay, so we're going to switch you two. Right? So now somebody who's unfamiliar with the way they do things is now on the team. And why is that important? If somebody shows up late, like we say we're going to start the simulation after this break, I almost always start it after a break. And then people show up who missed the introduction, so they don't know the rules, and then you just stick them on a team. So that's the importance of training right there. Right? So they always...
Yep.
So
there's really no way to do this online or virtually or in Zoom, right?
Well, and that is the point of this conversation, because the ball game is fun, and the ball game is great, and the ball game causes some very, very interesting learning, but you just can't do that online.
Yeah.
And
not to the same effect. I mean, it's not nearly as fun online, although Mike and I have experimented with some of the games that are out there,
and we can
that
talk
are
about
online, and we can talk about that. The other thing that Mike didn't mention was trying to simulate the global orientation of teams and distribution of teams. And so we have a lot of organizations that have teams that are spread across wide time zones and across the pond. And so in a real life situation, it makes it a lot more fun and interesting when you've got a large room and you're distancing a team, over in India.
You literally physically separate them. I was with one of the clients we were at. There was a very strong project manager on the team who was really taking control of their group and directing how things were going to go. And they had made the statement, like when we talk about cross-functional teams and how we want to make sure that they're co-located, because it was the past when that was a big deal. And they came and said, I have been working with teams in other time zones and locations for years, and I can categorically state that there is no detriment to that whatsoever. It's just as efficient. And I went, oh, okay. So when they got to the ball game, they were a couple rounds in, and I said, hey, is this the group that does a lot of the offshoring stuff? And they said, yes, we are. And I said, cool. And I picked 3 people, and I said, you, and you. Thank you so much for coming here for your onboarding and orientation, but it's time for you to go back home. So we're going to go back to your home place, and I led them all the way across the room. And I said, this is your country. This is the ocean, and no one can enter the ocean. And you are still on a team and have to touch all the balls and follow all the same rules that you've always been doing. Go. And she goes, oh, no, hold on. We have to be able to replan to account for that. And I went, oh, no, you don't. I have it on good authority that there is no detriment whatsoever to having people in other time zones and locations. So please commence your thing. And they did. And they dropped a lot of balls, especially the light ones. When you get the light ping pong ball and you're trying to pitch that thing across a long room, the football is actually easier. Yeah. Oh, it worked eventually. Yes.
It's fun to watch, though.
It was super fun to watch. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole thing is just set up. You can take whatever specific situation you pick up from the group, like, oh, well, we've got one product owner who's managing 3 teams or working with 3 teams. Like, oh, okay, cool. Let's simulate that. One product owner puts all the balls into play and receives all the balls for 3 teams.
Yeah, so you could sort of understand what the situations are that they're dealing with. Let me just restate what I think I just heard you say. Like the anti-patterns that they describe to you that they're maybe they know they're struggling with, or even better, they're trying to defend, right?
Yeah.
And just sort of make the metaphorical, physical. Yes. And
Yeah.
then
So
watch them.
you show them the product owner who's trying to do 3 teams, then you say, now let's get 3 product owners and see how much better the teams do.
And you can see people's heads sort of wrap their you can see them understand the theoretical or the reasons behind why they've been struggling, and seeing the results.
So that gives us a touchstone that we can use throughout the remainder of training to say, remember this. What does this remind you of? This remind you. But then we've got a virtual situation, So for this client, not all the training is in person. There is a remote. We're not going to do hybrid. We're never mixing. But when we do the remote, we have to for the training. We're not going to do hybrid training.
It's just it's an interesting statement. You said we're not going to do hybrid. It's either all in person or all remote.
For the training.
Why wouldn't? Yeah. Why
wouldn't you? Well, have you ever been in a hybrid training situation before?
It was terrible.
Why was it terrible?
Well, the focus was all over the place, right? And so typically, if everybody's in person, you can gather everybody up, you can look into their eyes, you can see if they're paying attention or not. If everybody's remote, then they have the same limited connection relative, but like everybody's on the same playing field. Hybrid, my experience is, I'm trying to think of a situation where you didn't have a local pool of attention in person and then people sort of scattered. It was more of a hub and spoke kind of thing that ended up happening, where people remotely had a sort of a limited vision into what was, but they weren't really being included. It wasn't all one group. It was more a local group, and then sort of people with limited interaction and it was a worse outcome overall for the group. Yeah.
The best we managed with that is we got a large camera that could show the whole room, but the remote people couldn't participate, right?
Harder to hear.
Watch.
Everything is worse.
Right. Yeah. There's no way to get them into the immediacy of a group to hear the interaction, what they're doing. They can really just observe the large thing, and it's mayhem. It's just chaos, right?
Can't ask questions in real time. It's terrible.
Right. So when and that's just with the ball game. When you're doing the regular training, they don't hear quite as well either. Like, you can get a mic on the instructor, and that makes things a little bit better. But then you have to be really careful about the comments from the room or the questions that are coming from the room, and make sure that that's being repeated. Because if you don't, what you end up with is the room asks questions, and then the online people ask questions, and they're usually the same question. And so...
Yeah, they're the natural question. It's a lot more work and overhead for the facilitator is what I hear you saying. Is you have to...
Right.
You can do it, but it's, never going to be as good and much harder. Yeah.
So we've at least aligned on no hybrid training. It's all remote or all in person, which means the remote people are not going to get the benefit of that ball game experience unless we come up with an alternative. And that is what we focused on in the last APLN session. We put that out there and said, hey, there are a couple of online simulations, tools, things that people can do. Do these help us capture at least some of those same learning objectives that we saw, that we get from the ball game? Right. So how would we work in a manager interruption? How would we work in shared resources? How would we work in, like, those tend to be important, right? So we started evaluating.
It feels like this should be an app. Maybe this is an opportunity for custom software. Like, maybe in Zoom there should be, in their little app store, there should be a thing of training, because at the app level you could handle these interruptions, right? Anyway, sorry, there's a bird in my garage. What did you come up with?
It's dive bombing you.
Yeah, this is a great example of the kind of thing that can happen. It's hard to simulate.
So there were a couple things we looked at. Somebody did make an app. Someone made a web-based application that's a virtual room, and you pick a virtual avatar, and you go and you stand in a room, and you pick up a ball off a table, and you have to,
point it,
align yourself, point in the general direction. The receiver has to be facing you, and as long as you're within a certain radius of, you will catch the ball. But if you don't, it drops and it just lands on the ground. So that part works. The trouble was the interface is very kludgy. Like, you've got to use arrow keys to move up, down, left, right, but your mouse cursor can be used to face and to throw the ball and catch it. And so it even worked in right and left hands. It's a great start, right? But the interaction is not quite there. So if you are not an avid gamer and I have never tried doing arrow key maneuvering or the ASDW keys. Bird?
Walnut.
Walnut.
Big
You are
walnut tree
being-
right outside. And every 5 years, it's a big walnut year. And this 23 is a big walnut year. So, no, it's not hostilities. It's
Okay.
the tree.
For us, it's a big acorn year, but I get it.
Walnuts are massive. They can really
Yeah.
make noise.
So you are being beset by nature. You've
It's
got
great
birds,
outdoors.
You got walnuts.
Well, that's
Who
the
knows
benefit of
what's
being in this
next?
room. It's beautiful. Yeah. Well, actually, there's a coyote. Like literally, there's a coyote that just walks down. It's like a cartoon. You driving somewhere. He's just walking down the street. He's not interested. He's not scared of you. He's going on the way to his cartoon
He's
adventures.
looking for a road runner.
Yeah, exactly. It's weird.
He's checking the mailbox for his latest shipment
and then
from
the
Acme
big-
products.
The big handful comes down and crushes him, and he gets up and regenerates and goes on. Anyway, that's what my life is like.
Okay, so we can drop that.
Yeah. that's
Um,
fine.
Where
So,
were
yeah,
we?
that app, the app, and we played with the app, and it was interesting. Like Mike said, though, I think it was a good start in theory, but the interface needs a lot of work. But there were some
Yeah.
others though that are, I guess, variations of the simulation,
Yeah,
and some were better, some were less better.
yeah.
If I can be
You can say worse.
worse.
So there was one where somebody tried to make it simple. The rules had to be simple, and you needed to not be constrained by the technology. You didn't need to have physical prowess to do it, and it was just a numbers game. It was something where every member in the group has to increment a number verbally. So the first person would say 1, the second person would say 2, and so on and so forth. And then they introduced a rule that said every number that's divisible by 3, instead of saying the number, you say
You
a
clap.
phrase. You clap.
You clap. Mm-hmm.
You clap your hands. So, in theory,
If
this
you're
would be a good
mathematically
idea, right?
literate and you know it, clap your hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
That seems like a complication.
Anyway, so
Exactly.
when we did that one, first of all, there's no collaboration problem there. Once they pick an order, they just go in order, right? So there's you're missing that. You can't have someone walk up in the middle and say, "Oh, could you throw a 7 in there?" It's just like it's not gonna. There's no way
Yeah.
to interrupt the flow.
Yeah.
There's no. I suppose if you really tried, you might be able to get shared resources in which you had to pay attention to both numbers, but that would be impossible. But it turned out technology was a huge limiter. If the person didn't have a good audio feed or a bad connection, they would not hear everyone talk, right? Some people's microphones would helpfully mute out the clapping sound.
Yes.
So there was just all sorts of stuff, and it fell apart. It was just not. It didn't work as well as we had anyone had hoped. So we rejected that one. We said that's not going to be a super big help. What was the one? I know the game of circles is the one we settled on, but
I
there
was just gonna
was
say,
another one in between.
Yeah, so there were a couple of them. One of them was a game of circles that tried to leverage Miro. I think it was Miro or
Yeah,
Miro.
there were a couple that
I think
used
it was
Miro.
Miro.
Well, it could use any of them, but I know
Okay.
which one it can't use because I've tried.
Okay. But it tried to use Miro, let's say, as a visual, tool. And I'm trying to remember. I thought the rules on that one were a little wonky.
Well, just
I
don't.
wish I could remember them.
Okay, here, hold on. I'll find them. But let's
while
not
Mike's
do.
finding those. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let's not do Game of Circles yet. We'll leave that
Oh,
one
okay,
for
okay.
last. So, do you remember the?
Is that the one with dragons and like the families and stuff?
It is not.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
It's a different game.
All right. So where was it? Okay, so one of them was, one was just a straight, very much like a Kanban simulation. He called it the Agile Point game. You would do the same thing. You would estimate how many tickets you could get through the system, and what happened was and everything in the to-do list had to get moved in progress, and then when it was in progress, every member of the team had to put their initials on the card, and once that was done, they could move it to done. But and so you could see where that would simulate an agile team doing a thing, but every member of the team has to do exactly one thing to every card. And they know exactly what that thing is, and there's no sequence to it. So what ended up happening is the product owner, moved the card in progress, and then every member of the team just went down the list and just put their initials on every card. They didn't really think about it. It just became this rote. It became the only limitation was how fast could they edit the cards.
And
Right.
as a facilitator, you really didn't have much in the way of variability that you could throw in.
Right.
To throw them off or
Like
or
I could
anything
throw
like
an
that.
extra card in the to-do column. I could even throw one in the in-progress column, but their method would still have filled in every name on the card. So it really didn't. It was there, but it didn't help. And then we went to the game of circles. And so this is apparently, Jeff, the creator of this.
Yeah, Malud. Mm-hmm.
And so what she ended up doing, it's not quite the same. The feel is different. You still have an estimate and an actual that you're trying to do, but there's a massive pile of circles, little ball like circles, and there's two different colors, and there's this target. The board is set up like a target, and it's got different rings and different areas in it, and you have to progress the balls through section 1, then section 2, then section 3. So it's very Kanban-y in that sense. And then all the yellow balls have to go into a black circle at the end, and all the black balls have to go into a yellow circle at the end. And then and the rules for placement are the same person who puts a ball into play into the first area has to be the person who takes it out of the last area and puts it into the final circle.
And in between, it has to go through. It has to touch.
And in between, it goes through. It's got to go through every step, and no one person can progress a ball through consecutive steps.
So it has to go between people.
Yeah. So at least it has to be a trade-off, and then it's sort of optimized for a group of 4 to 6 people. But if you had more than that, you could figure that they could try and do some different things, and she gave them like 3 minutes to do this, and it was possible in 3 minutes to move there's 200 total balls sitting there ready to go.
In 3 minutes?
Yeah. You couldn't do them one at a time. You had to figure out like you can multi-select, but because the target areas are different shapes, multi-selecting is potentially problematic.
Let me ask a potentially unhelpful question here.
Okay.
Does this give the wrong impression regarding work in process and keeping it low?
It does. There's no limitation to that. What does happen though is you do end up with the theory of constraints come into play because you create bottlenecks. You end up seeing bottlenecks at certain points where work backs up.
I see.
So what you could do is, and so I could see that we could fix that problem with one simple rule addition. If there's any circles in progress, they count negative.
Right. So at the end, you subtract.
Yeah. So
anything
maybe
that's in
you delivered
progress because it doesn't add value.
Yeah. Maybe you got 50 balls in the finished steps, but any balls that are in progress come off the 50.
Oh, so they have started but not finished.
Right.
Yeah.
They would decrement. I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I came up with a way, and so hats off to Malud for coming up with this, and I came up with a couple of variations, as I did with the ball game, because that's me. And so I ended up creating an additional rule that says if you ever see a red ball, that ball has to take precedence over the other balls. And there are no red balls initially, but
Service
red balls
classes.
can be dropped in to the I at one point I suggested popping them into the middle of the target, but I think that's not gonna because then it's really, if I stick the ball and it appears in 3.
That's patently unfair, first of all.
Yes, that's patently unfair. But if I stick it in the
Welcome to
pile
work.
of balls to be done, and the product owner sees it and says, "Oh shoot, I gotta take precedence on that and move it there," I think that'll work.
So this is all happening in Miro or Mural or some canvas, some infinite
Yes.
canvas with multiple people
Yes.
at the same time moving stuff around.
And we
So
can
does
give
this-
people a link to this. We'll put a link on the screen so people can go see this.
But then does that give you an opportunity as a facilitator, as a trainer, to do some of these things that you were talking about in real time with people in the same room tossing balls back and forth where as stuff is moving around, you can tap somebody in the shoulder, you can dump stuff, you can snatch something out. Like, can you go back to that, listening for what the anti-patterns are that they have in their situation and sort of reproduce those in some way metaphorically on Miro and help them understand why that's
I
a
think
problem?
I can get some of them. Like I can do the different size balls. Like in a later thing, I created one with various variations of the balls. Same number of balls,
Yeah.
just some are much bigger than others. And then have that.
So they have to zoom out to see the ball in Miro? Or they would be more difficult somehow?
It'll still be in the source area. They'll just, if they created a pattern where they would multi-select, it's going to mess them up.
Right.
Right. So they won't be able to multi-select and get the same number of balls that they were doing, and then they won't fit as well. So they're going to have to adapt to that. So I can give them that one. The red ball, the hot job, is sort of the same. I could dump one in the middle and wait for them to say that's patently unfair, and then it's like, well, then how would you handle that? And then if they say, well, we would send them back to the product owner, then drop the balls in the ball area. So I think dropping in the middle the first time is reasonable. Okay. Swapping team members, having people, you've been working on board 1, now go to board 2. We'll do things like we'll say, hey, what I really liked doing with the group is where I'd say, I couldn't help but notice that team 1 got a lot more balls done than team 2. So clearly there's a mismatch. This is an unbalanced thing. So we're going to take some of the people from team 1 and put them on team 2, which is not going to help. Right. But so
you
we
let
could
them see what happens.
Yeah, but we can do things like that. Like we could swap it's like, okay, now go in and do the thing. And they're going to have to very rapidly catch them up on what their role, like, oh, you're replacing the guy who moved things from 3 to 4. And the thing is, if you only have 5 people in the simulation, it's a very easy pattern to decide. The product owner puts things in 1, takes things out of 5. One person takes things from 1 to 2. One person takes things from 2 to 3. One person takes things from 3 to 4. One person takes things from 4 to 5. And everybody has a role. So really, it's not helpful. But if you were to say, we have 8 people on that team, we don't want anyone to be idle. What are you going to do about that? And when we did the simulation at APLN, I don't know why they thought this, but they thought, what we'll do is we'll put 2 people moving stuff from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was because the theory was one can work on the yellow balls, the other one can work on the black balls.
Yes, but then they converge in the middle, in section 3 in this very small space. And the poor person in the middle is trying to keep everything.
You just moved the bottleneck downstream a little bit,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And the rule doesn't say there's only one person who can put balls into play and take them out. The rules say the same person who puts the ball into play has to be the person who takes them out. So you could run it with parallel product owners.
And the balls are not numbered, but you could do them based on so okay.
Yeah. So it captures some of the same concepts. It does still have the time constraint. I'm going to drop it to 2 minutes. I think 3 minutes is too long. We don't need that many balls to get through the system to prove it.
To Mike's point, the other thing is, 5 people, I don't know if the learning is great. 8 people is probably good. But the other thing I think that we learned was if it was an enormous amount of people, 20 people, then you would probably have to break it into a couple of teams because it would be absolute chaos. I don't know if you've ever used a Miro board, but when you've got a bazillion people out there, 20 people out there, and all these little cursors, it becomes untenable.
Yeah, the cursors actually become impediments.
It looks like air traffic control radar.
Like you can't even see the ball you're trying to pick up because there's an arrow over it.
Somebody's standing on my balls.
So
show title.
It's been right there the whole time. So
it's inevitable.
It is set up. There's multiple boards that you can do this on. You can spread people out. I'm gonna have, I think, the class is max out at 20 people. So I might stick 20 people on one board just to have them say, hey, look, you got a 20-person team. How fun is that?
Oh, hey, that's a good learning point. I like that.
Yeah.
I had that thought too. Does it obscure the lesson of the learning if you give them a size of team that you wouldn't actually have in real life or wouldn't recommend anyway? Because stuff isn't supposed to work on a team that's too big. So does that clarify or does it obscure?
Anything has the potential to do either. It's like it could clarify, it could obscure, depending on what you do. That's the art of the facilitation. Yeah. So like we used to do things like we would let them self-organize and they would try and take the entire class full of people and form one team in the ball game. And then and they would eventually figure out, oh, we can get multiple balls going, and then it gets really crazy. But they still have a lot. There's a lot of hands that you have to go through. And so when you even if you break them in two, the velocity goes up because there's less steps to go through to get a ball done. And the incident of errors with a larger team goes up. You got 20 chances to drop the ball as opposed to
it just occurred to me in the real life ball game. An interesting variation might be, do you have a medicine ball?
Something that's super heavy. Someone's going to lose a toe. They're going to break a foot, man.
We're not insured for that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just.
It would be funny.
Let me see one of those remote teams catch a medicine ball.
I'm going to get a tennis ball, one tennis ball, and I'm going to inject like something heavy into it.
So that would simulate what a vice president coming in at the last moment saying, "We just have one more thing we need to finish. This whole international order thing. I don't think it's normal. Instead of shipping from Iowa, you're shipping to Peru. Not a big deal. Just let me stick it in the backlog.
Yeah,
fill it with lead.
Can you just do this too?
Mm-hmm. Lead or radioactive material.
So I think the game of circles is my starting point. That's where I'm gonna go, and I will figure out ways to. I've worked out a couple ways to get some of the experience in there. It's never going to be an exact analog for the physical problem. Like I had one where one of the people had a vision issue and had no depth perception.
Oh.
And you're playing a ball game where you're trying to expect them to catch balls.
Yeah.
And they still have to follow the rules. It's not fair to absolve them of that rule. But the team could account for it somehow. There are ways that they could do it. And
so have somebody else catch it and then hand off or something?
Nope. Handoffs are fun. But the rule is there has to be airtime. There's no rule that says it has to be a toss. It could be a drop, right? So, So what you could do is you have to adapt by putting somebody else really close to them, right?
Yeah,
but not
cross-train them.
But not right next to them, because right or left is also unfair. But there's ways that you can do it.
This teamwork stuff is complicated. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah, I know.
It's actually difficult.
These complex
There's more
handoffs
to think about.
It's ridiculous. What are we doing, man?
We should figure that out.
So anyway, we go through that, and they do the simulation for like a half an hour, and we find out what you learn from that, and then we teach them a framework. And say, let's talk about Scrum, or let's talk about Kanban, or let's talk about both.
Here's how the framework accounts for and helps with these things that you've just observed are a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
and you could even
the
say,
nice thing is that it gives them an opportunity to have some fun, let their hair down, which opens them up to, hopefully, opens them up to some learning in addition to, okay, here's some lessons to learn and take away. So
this would count as concrete practice, one of those 4 C's from that book that we talked about that one time. Training from the back of the Zoom room.
From the back
Yeah.
This room. Yeah, so the trick is keeping this in 15-minute chunks and for normal stuff. The ball game is changing constantly. It's a physical activity. I don't have any problem or any compulsion to try and shorten that into 15-minute chunks. They're already
Chunky enough.
chunky. It's the rest of the material. How do you form a break in between? We're presenting Scrum. Let's talk about the roles that are involved in Scrum, and then let's do something to change things up. Like what's going to be that interface between them. And I think especially in this group, they don't have people with those roles, right? There's no Scrum Master in their organization. There is no product owner yet. They have product people. They have partners. They have project managers. They've got tech leads, but they don't have anyone in those roles yet. So maybe stop after presenting the roles and say, what do you see, or what people do you see fitting into those, sliding into those spaces, and get a little conversation in there so there's a chance for them to reflect back, and then go into events and then do the same thing. What is this similar? What does this remind you of that you do right now?
Cool.
Right. So this is my hope. This is my plan.
So you have to fly out there this week, or?
It's not a flight, but it's going to be. It's not my backyard.
Okay.
It's adjacent. So that's where I'm going. And then when we do the virtual stuff, then game of circles and see what that does. But other than that, the conversation should be similar.
I'll be curious to, number one, see how your game of circles goes. But if I did envy, which I don't, but if I did, I would be envious of being able to play the ball game in person again. So I kind of
Jeff
pine
doesn't
for those days.
He doesn't engage in envy just on a personal.
It's a wasted
policy.
emotion, frankly. It's just pure BS, wasted emotion. So
Tell me more about that, Jeff.
what's the point of envy? I mean, if you want something, go get it. If you don't, then But envying somebody else that is, then that's just kind of a waste of time, isn't it?
I wish I could be like that. I'm so jealous. What is that like? I cannot even imagine.
I wish I knew.
Just do it.
Jesus, teach me how to do that.
Just say no to envy.
Okay, that's right. Here's your brain. Here's your brain on envy.
Exactly.
Any questions?
All right. Well, not to be too hosty or anything like that, but I feel like that's a pretty good discussion of training. Mike, do you want to come back in a future episode and update us on how it went when you drove there and didn't fly?
I have a feeling I will have no choice but to update you.
Okay, very good.
That it will be it'll be so much in the forefront of my mind that it will come out one way or another, and all of you can hear how it went. So
Excellent.
At least in the game of circles, you should invite us as quiet observers or something. It'll be interesting, but I know you can't do that.
I can't do that, but we could potentially get a group of people to play the revised version of it before I have to do it live.
I'd be down.
Cool. We could do that.
Let me know. Yeah.
I actually think we have the next APLN meeting before then, but I don't know if I want to do that to the APLN group again. We got a lot of new people last time, and while it was a fruitful discussion, I don't
Full
want
of fruit.
Round fruit. A lot
Yum.
of round fruit. Yeah.
All right.
So the
Well,
main
has
problem
no
with that video,
nectarines, though.
yeah, the single nectarine. Someday we'll have to tell that story again. Anyway, Matt wanted to wrap up.
It feels like this has been this agile thing. I don't know. I might be wrong about that, but it seems like.
Yes, and who have you been through this?
I've typically been Matt Beam.
I have been Mike Markey.
And I have been and still am Jeff Singleton.
And we will more or less be back next. Oh my God. Let's edit this part. See you next time.
Adios,
See ya.
everybody.
And that's the end of this Agile Thing.